Thanks, Hayden. Blank screen's always a good way to start. Okay, so what I want to do is there's been quite a bit of talk about A Spec, so I just thought I'd do a little bit of a recap about what A Spec is all about. But firstly, I spent 12.5 years in the water industry, and so my craft was as a survey draftsman, dealing with plotting field notes onto hard copy plans that dated back to 1895. So I've got a pretty good background about what capturing data is all about. But since then I've been focusing on my own business, working as a GIS consultant, but predominantly in the space between GIS and asset management, the whole information management paradigm. So I'm not going to sell you any software because we don't have any. A Spec is not a software. A Spec is a process. And it's a process that benefits the current standards for design, the current standards for construction. Because it's a process about what you record after that asset has been built. And that's really important. And we know that it's useful because the people that have been involved in the development of the standards are the people from industry, from GIS people to IT people to planners to asset managers and the like. As mentioned by Hayden, 13 years on, this is where we're at. We started with one specification, D Spec. And Adrian mentioned earlier about nomenclature and the challenges with that. I experienced a very similar thing 3 years ago when I started with Wellington. I call it death by word. I introduced D Spec to Wellington and they said, yeah, fantastic, but we can't use it. I said, but it's D Spec, it's drainage. And they said, yeah, we can't use it. And then I learned that drainage in New Zealand is not drainage in Australia. So that was my first lesson. So we actually changed our logo to reflect stormwater drainage. Then we were able to move on. From one council in 2002 as a concept to do some data capture, it's now become a consortium. It's about collaborating across industry, and as you can see, there's quite a few players in there. And if you're familiar with any of the Australian councils, there's some quite small ones there, based in Margaret River, to some quite large organisations. And of course, the group of New Zealand entities that we're now involved with. But over time, what we realised was that we've actually created a model to collaborate. And I've heard quite a few presentations today about collaboration and about coordination. What we found is that because of our approach, the collaboration happened by default. And I say by default because the core there where it talks about the advisory council, that's effectively the user base, the key stakeholders. Now, some of those key stakeholders don't necessarily use the specifications as part of their process, but they have a say in how those specifications may be developed. And what we've found is that on one side we have the industry consultants who are very key stakeholders to be able to deliver the services that you need for the assets that are built and recorded, to the software vendors who provide the tools. So effectively, we also found a cross-marketing opportunity between the consultants and the vendors, where vendors who are traditionally building tools for the councils were all of a sudden finding a market opening up for them to deliver more tools to the consultants. So underpinning all of that was a compliance to deliver data in accordance to A Spec requirements. An A Spec is an umbrella. And the previous slide I showed a number of specs. So it's an umbrella deliberate to say, look, A can stand for all, can stand for anything. It's just A, because it's the first letter of the alphabet. TAG, Transport Analytics Governance Group. How this came about was from the learnings of Wellington. So we put a structure in place, as Hayden has explained to you, and then the proof of that concept wasn't the success of it in Wellington, it was the success of it of engaging with others in a collaborative gesture. So the Transport Analytics Governance Group is made up of these entities. And the key thing there is that those entities, outside of Treasury and IPWA, probably own about 80% of all the road and infrastructure in New Zealand. So that's a significant dollar value of assets. And what they're looking at doing is taking an established specification we developed in Australia and to look at how to localise that. And to be able to do that, we needed strong collaboration. So just imagine entities, representatives from this group getting them all into the same room to agree on the same thing. And my philosophy of that is leave the egos at the door, because there's no room for them. There are plenty of opinions and they're all valid, but ultimately, if we take out the concept of nothing's right or wrong, nothing's good or bad, what are we left with? We're left with things either work or they don't work. And we can have opinions around that, but it's about what are the actions that we need to take to get things to work. And that's ultimately what happens at the technical working group. Now, I've been doing this for quite some time, and it still becomes a humbling experience for me. You know, so 13 years down the track, I'm sitting in front of a group of people and we're talking about what's going to go into A Spec that's going to make it usable in New Zealand. And one of the key players in the technical working group says, well, George, clearly you failed. So I don't look at it as good or bad, right or wrong, it's just feedback. So what have I missed? So taking that approach and trying to work out what's been working and what hasn't been working. What wasn't working was we didn't have the message across about the objectives of that group. The objectives of the group was to be frank and fearless. The objective is to break the spec. Because if we break it, then we know what's missing and then we know what's not working. So that's what our objective has been. Now, some of the really great work that came out of this technical working group is they got together and they formed this funnel. So this is their metadata requirements, and they've gone from everything from inventory right through to benchmarking and the like. But one of the critical things was, and what I've got circled at the bottom, was that without inventory, none of the other aspects around managing an asset can be done. So that's what the focus is, the inventory around as constructed data. And it becomes, and it's a pretty interesting paradigm when it doesn't matter what people say, there's no reaction to it. It's just feedback. You know, no is not an answer, it's just feedback. So, this is where